Hey everyone, welcome to the Human Cloud Podcast, the spot where leaders come to move the freelance economy forward. Hey, so today we have Dan Oron, EVP of Product at Fiverr. Now listen, there's a couple things about this episode that I'm just so excited to bring to you. And the first is both Fiverr and the industry's transformation, going from a marketplace to a comprehensive hiring/professional services solution. And so this is one theme across the freelance economy that we're seeing. And typically what we see is that niche, hyper-focused platforms significantly outperform the large marketplaces. And this is seen consistently across regions, across industries, across skill sets, you name it. And so you're going to hear how Fiverr is addressing this. The second thing is we're going to dig into the technology behind this industry and what's really at the cutting edge, because Fiverr recently expanded its product offerings, and it includes a personalized AI assistant as well as a professional catalog for specific skill sets. So what is AI? We know it's this massive thing that doesn't necessarily have the exact use cases and business cases, but you're going to see how Fiverr is handling that right now. The third thing is you're going to hear from Dan how in the world this industry is going to professionalize. Specifically, what are the things that need to happen? So one concept we're going to talk about is, why don't we have a chief freelance officer, and what would that chief freelance officer do? So you internal champions right now that are both evangelizing, setting up programs, scaling freelance adoptions, this one is for you. Specifically, what do you need to do to truly scale freelance across your organization? So listen, I can't wait for all of you to listen to this and learn from Dan. And then most importantly, go out there and drive some change. Dan, thank you so much for hopping on the pod. Before I dive into it, do you want to give a quick intro on yourself, Dan?
Sure, absolutely. So first, thank you for having me. My name is Dan Oron. I run the product team at Fiverr's marketplace. Been with the company for close to 2 years at this point, and most of my career has been in e-commerce and marketplaces. So prior to joining Fiverr, I've been part of Etsy, and my last role as a VP of product, where I run multiple teams from buyer experience to search and ads, and a lot of other teams in between. And then before that, I was at eBay, where I led the team that built eBay's first-party advertising business and product from the ground up. Today, it's more than $1 billion business. So most of my career is in that space, and kind of Fiverr felt like a natural fit going into marketplaces, but in the industry of freelancing and talent.
I love it. And so listen, we had Gali on a couple months ago,
Yep.
and when looking at the space, Fiverr has really led from a product perspective and our space. And so we define freelance as, if the supply is self-employed, we call it freelance. So that encompasses a lot, right? But historically, my background was I was early at Gigster. So we were doing custom software dev, then went over to Microsoft. So how do we get an enterprise to adopt a freelance workforce? And we have this interesting thing where we always have these questions. Are we product? Are we tech? Are we a staffing industry? Are we professional service? Are we agency? Are we consulting, right? Like, what are we? And historically, we haven't been product, right? Historically, it's been easier to just say, okay, this is staffing, but it's a 1099, right? This is 1099 staffing, and just go with that. But Fiverr, you guys have always been leading the charge from a product perspective. And increasingly, that's meant from a data perspective. And so whenever talking about you all, I always talk about how, okay, if there's a feature that is really going to catch on in the freelance space, Fiverr's probably already built it. Likewise, when it comes to really being innovative, y'all have taken the lead on acquisitions. And so you acquired Anco, you acquired Stoke. If there's anything that is remotely valuable for your customers, you're probably going to acquire it, right? And so you've really taken the baton. And so, the first thing I'd love to talk about with you is kind of the before Fiverr times, right? So you were in the Bay Area, you were at Etsy, you were at eBay, and you took this leap to jump into our space. But I'd love to hear, how would you describe your career pre-Fiverr and then why? Bring us into the mindset of why you took the leap about, looks like around 2 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I tend to define myself as a product person. I love the intersection of people or customers, products, and business. And when you have all three connecting together, then you can really make an impact in people's lives. And I've been really fortunate to be part of great companies in the space, as I mentioned, in the field of marketplaces, where you have this very unique lighting in the bottle, where one side provides the supply, the other side provides the demand. In many cases, we define them as sellers and buyers. And then when you match them together, you really help solve one side's needs as well as the other side's needs. I think that's what makes it so unique, and the reason I stuck with it for so long. And when I made the decision to join Fiverr, these are the things that I've thought about as well. I thought, okay, there's on the one hand, there's businesses who have strategic needs that they're not always able to solve on their own. They can be really small, like solopreneurs, or can be as large as corporations. And on the other hand, there's so much talent in the world, but we rarely match them together in a way that can solve for quality and cost and speed and availability. So joining Fiverr and seeing what it was able to do over the first maybe 12 or 13 years at the time, and then taking it to the next level, has been really a passion of mine, and that's what we've been focusing since I joined.
I love it. Let's dig into when we say a marketplace, right? Because here's one of the industry challenges is that in some cases, and I'll just give you sort of from the way that I've seen it from an enterprise adoption perspective, in some cases, a marketplace is great, right? When we think about the speed, we think about the cost efficiencies, a marketplace can be great. In other cases, it can be terrible in terms of lack of support, self-service, right? When you're talking about high quality, high value, a marketplace can be tough, right? It's not like even buying a car, you think a marketplace would be tough, but they figure it out. So from your expertise, seeing Etsy, right, seeing eBay, and now dealing with Fiverr, how would you describe our industry as a whole when it comes to, are we a marketplace? Are we like Etsy? Are we like eBay? Are we Uber? Right? If you say we're like Uber, I might cry, but that's okay. But how would you describe the concept of a marketplace when it comes to freelance?
Yeah, so when you think about marketplaces in general, I think what's common on many of the examples that you mentioned is that um, you can connect both sides, and occasionally it can create great experience or subpar experiences because you go through the process of finding the person who you want to work with, but you may not have the information needed to make that decision. And that's true when you need to choose a product or an eBay or Amazon, or customize a specific item that you really like on Etsy. But that's also true when you think about marketplaces, like Fiverr has been, when there is tons of talent, but you may not know if they have the skills that you really need in order to solve your own need. So there's many similarities about that. But when we think about where Fiverr is going, not necessarily where it started, it did started as a marketplace, as a two-sided marketplace, but it's evolving into becoming more of a hiring platform. And the reason I'm saying evolving, that it's not a transformation, it's not a transition, it's an expansion of who we are. So for some customers, marketplaces are great. They provide a lot of supply, they provide a lot of diversity, you can make your own decisions. But for some of our customers, they need a much more specific solution where they can have an easier job of finding who they need to work with, or they need specific tools to manage the talent. And that doesn't really work with every marketplace. So we need to kind of change who we are a little bit and be more relevant for those customers that you mentioned.
Let's get deeper into this. So, one, you use the word expansion, right? I think that's a really interesting point. So you're not saying that we're pivoting, right? You're also not saying that we're transforming, right? So you've used the word expansion. Go
Mhm.
deeper into that. What do you mean by expansion?
So I think it starts with customers, and then I think in our industry we oftentimes use the word client to describe them. If we think about where Fiverr has started, we really started with a great product market fit for the solopreneurs, for the small businesses. I'll give personal examples if you will. I think about my wife. My wife is a business owner. She's an interior designer. And when she started her business, like many small businesses, she started with the things that she knows how to do, and she had to learn a lot of things on her own. In many cases, she tried doing some of the things on her own. And it took her time until she learned that there's probably experts who can do the work better than she can. And I think many solopreneurs, many entrepreneurs go through that phase of, okay, how do I do this for the first time? It could be building a website or designing your logo, to all the way to building a business plan, or how do I grow the business at a certain stage where I feel like I can no longer scale with myself. I need more people who can help me get the job done. But then if you think about the other segments of our clients, then there are medium-sized businesses and there's corporates. Those needs, their needs are dramatically different. They're no longer at the point where all of the work is going to be outsourced or getting the help of freelancers. They're going to look at specific skills that they may not have in-house, or they may need certain expertise where they need consulting. And for those specific needs, then having a marketplace is not always the best solution. And hence, I'm talking about expansion because we want to be relevant for the solopreneurs, for where Fiverr started, and we're extremely relevant in that domain. The thing is, and you mentioned, we've kind of productized that space. We took something that's almost unproductizable service and made it a product that you can buy close to the same way that you can buy things, items sitting on the shelf. But if you think about the larger side of the business, businesses who have multiple employees where they need to extend the workforce with additional needs and requirements and have needs such as compliance and others, then they need a different solution. And hence I'm talking about expansion because you want to be relevant for all of those different clients.
Gotcha. So you're really digging into the fact that our industry was built off startups and SMBs, and the reality is 90% of the spend is in large companies. And I'll give you some numbers, right? So for you listeners out there, I think I'm interested to see if you listeners if these numbers actually really surprise you. But so we look right now at what this space could be. And there's around fixed $3.6 trillion spent on what we'd call contingent talent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Less than 10, probably even less than 5% of that is actual freelance spend. And if you look at these large enterprises, I mean, if you take a company of 50,000 employees, they have 50,000 contractors. So this is not a small budget. Now, with that said, if you look at the freelance platform industry, it's around $444 billion with a 12.6 compound annual growth rate. And so it's a healthy, we have a healthy industry, but we're still so small. And
Right.
part of that is we haven't been able to unlock the enterprise. And so let's dig deeper into, what have you all learned at Fiverr that has enabled you to know what these enterprises need? And you acquired Stoke, and that acquisition, was that in 2022? When was that?
That was, prior to me joining. I think it was around that time.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so Stoke is all about, hey, this is a freelance management, right? So more than just here's one freelancer, but here's 1,000 freelancers, and here's how to manage them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned in the beginning, we need to be able to manage 100,000 freelancers, right? So there's a level of scale that our industry just has never dealt with. But so, what have been some of the main things that you have all had to incorporate into both the product and the stack? Is it things like account management? Is it things like classification? What have you really had to put on from the expansion side, put into the enterprise side?
Yeah. So when you think about those larger businesses, as you mentioned, their needs are quite different than the solopreneurs, the small businesses. They have certain needs like compliance or the need to hire a specific person in a specific geography and a specific time zone. Their needs are just very different than someone who's willing to spend the time to find a person and work with them. They also need to scale this at a much larger way and with predictability. You want to be able to expect the same output and the same outcomes from a group of people in the same way that you would work with full-time talent in some cases. So the products that are needed in order to manage that kind of talent and meet the specific needs of every business, and they vary dramatically, as you mentioned, are quite different than what we traditionally had at Fiverr. So integrating Stoke, or in its new name, Fiverr Enterprise, into a suite of products, and really creating tools such as account management, such as project management, such as the ability to work with highly skilled professional talent has been really critical in us scaling that business. And we think there's much more growth and room for us ahead in developing those capabilities that we currently have on the platform, because as you mentioned, the market is still very much untapped. I think many companies still work in very traditional ways, perhaps in the same ways that they've worked for the last 20 or 30 years. And there haven't been really great solutions across the industry to help them scale that. And we acknowledge that. We know that we can definitely play a role in that because we have the supplies, we have the expertise, but we still need to build a lot of products to make that happen.
Yeah, and how do you balance? So you're a product guy and you understand, everything can be built, but the question is, should it be built? And then usually the question of should it be built comes down to, all right, how can we test that? And do people actually use it, right? And when we talk about the enterprise, every single company has such unique requirements. And I'll give you some insider baseball over at in 2016 at Gigster. What really drowned us was that we didn't have enterprise expertise, but we had an enterprise strategy. And what we realized was that every single enterprise had a different MSA process, a different budget flow, a different PO flow, a different invoicing flow. And, looking 6 months down the road, we're drowning in these little things that wasn't sexy, right? It wasn't the sexy product roadmap that was going to automate software development. It looked more like an MSP, right? Or a manual consultancy. And so
Right.
from your end, how have you balanced Fiverr's core DNA, which is a product first company and a data first company, with the unique requirements that an enterprise has that are just so boring?
Absolutely. So I think you have to take a customer first approach. And when you have a diverse set of customers with very different needs, because they're different in size, they're different, they vary in their industry, etc., then you need to build solutions that work for them rather than try to adapt your own solution to their needs. I'll give a couple of examples. So we mentioned that Fiverr started as a marketplace, right? And it's based on an e-commerce model, which means if you know how to shop or on an Amazon or eBay or an Etsy, you can shop on Fiverr as well, right? It's quite straightforward. You have a homepage, you have a search box, you have a page with freelancers that you can choose who you want to work with. That part is quite simple to understand. But if you go into the larger side of the business, you might want to rethink if that's really the solution they need. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Because in many cases, they want to augment their current workforce. And that means that workforce needs to work in the same ways that they used to work internally. So as an example, if internally you use communication tools such as Slack or Microsoft Teams, then you want your freelancers to operate in the same way. If you have a daily stand-up with your engineers, you might want this expert that you brought to join your stand-up, but then that might create some compliance issues in some areas. So those customizations that you need to have for the specific needs of the business may not work with a product that's a great fit for a marketplace for small businesses. You really have to think about a very different set of capabilities for them. And, in some ways, it means that you really should focus on what you're great at. It could be the management of supply and having great talent across the globe that matches the needs of those specific companies. And then if they need to work in specific communication or process management that work for their own businesses, your product needs to find a way to harness the talent and let them connect to the client in the way that works for the client rather than the way it works for you.
Gotcha. So you mentioned the word augmentation, and I think that's one of the very, very tactical, I don't want to say shifts, but needs that we're seeing across these enterprises is they do need to embed. And to be honest with you, Dan, the question we always get is hey, 5 years from now, right? What's the freelance economy going to look like? And one of the top three words that we use is we do use embedded, meaning freelance is embedded across multiple industries, multiple companies. And the big killer here is that freelance stops being freelance and just becomes the existing processes, right? And becomes the existing talent strategy. Now, here's the really tough part. How does that how do you balance all the various types of skills and regions and industries? Because every industry is different, right? And every skill set is different. And so, for example, embedding a designer versus embedding a content writer versus embedding a software developer versus embedding a fractional a fractional CMO. How do you treat all the different industries, skills, regions? How are you balancing that? Do you take in one enterprise at a time approach? How do you balance all these just very very different variables?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and because there isn't a simple answer about that. It's quite nuanced, but I'll go a little bit into detail about what this means. So if you think about the needs of a specific business, one of the things they look for freelance talent to do is help them either provide skill, specific expertise that they may not have in-house, or scale. And in many cases, it's time bound, right? They want to have someone join their project and work for the next 6 months on this thing that they may not have really well defined. They actually might need the freelancer's help in defining it, right? And in some other cases, they know exactly what they want to do, but they don't have the people in-house to do it. And they need to embed those freelance talent in the team so they can get the work done. Well, traditional ways have been, okay, let's try and hire this person, but then it can take you maybe 3 to 6 months until you find that person. It can take you a really long time. It doesn't help you scale up or scale down at the speed that the business needs to move. So the access to freelance talent really helps you embed people in the right roles where you need them. And I think we still have a way to go in terms of making those people contribute in the same way that full-time employees contribute today. But one of the great things about using that freelance talent is that you can have someone help you embed them in the team, help you get something done for 3 to 6 months. And then the project's done, you move into the next thing, and that person can work on something else, right? So I think it's really about finding that balance between what your needs are, for how long, what type of expertise that you need as a client, and then finding the exact people with those skills that can help you get there. And it's easier done with freelance talent. And the reason it's easier to do with freelance talent is that you think about traditional hiring platforms, or maybe even more than one, like LinkedIn. Then you go through an interview process and a vetting process, and a lot of people are involved with that. And then you get to an offer stage, and you might have 3 candidates, and only one goes through, et cetera, et cetera. But then when the project's over, that person is still part of the team. You don't want to let them go and then think about the next thing. What you can do with freelance talent is really augment the team in those specific areas and bring that expertise that you need. And what we want to do at Fiverr is provide you with all of this information about the talent itself that helps you make those hiring decisions and pinpoint the exact expertise that you need, so you can really kind of plug and play talent into your organization in the scale and with the skills that you need.
It's really so. In hearing you say that, we're gonna get kind of nerdy, Dan.
Go for it.
There's I'll never forget. It was early 2000s, and it was a Dan Pink book, and there was two terms. It was Kavit Emptor and Kavit something else, but basically it meant buyer beware and seller beware, right? And the whole concept of a marketplace is that it's enabling transparency. So a world that used to be buyer beware is now seller beware. And it sounds like, one of the common questions that enterprise leaders always ask is usually, how do I get my hiring managers to adopt this? And one of the challenges they have is they typically don't know what they need. They don't want to create a job description. Whenever they do need something, they pick up the phone and they call their TA or their procurement or their contingent program, and they just talk to them, right? And then they do all the work, not the actual hiring manager. And it sounds like one of the things that you're really talking about is you are enabling the expertise to be shown. Now, you're not saying that, hey, this is the most perfect job description. What you're saying is, this is the expertise you need. Now go, right? Like go in the matter of days. And if it's not what you need, then stop, right? And if it's more of what you need, then go more. But one of the the biggest myths that or biggest sort of blockers that we deal with is simply that people don't get started because they think they don't know what they need, but in reality, the freelancer will tell them what they need. And
Exactly.
that's where, the past 6 months, we've seen a real rise of the term fractional. And I
Mhm.
think all fractional really is kind of just like word salad to basically say, hey, listen to me from a executive strategic point of view. Because typically freelancers, have been looked at as plug and play ICs, right? They fill a hole, they fill a gap, they plug in that outcome, they plug in that deliverable, but when I really need to be strategic, no, no, no. I need a CMO, right? I need an executive. And so I think part of what you're bringing up is, hey, how can and I'm going to call it a freelance product. I intentionally am not going to call it a marketplace, but how can a freelance product / freelance experience bring about the expertise for the hiring manager or the enterprise leader to literally just get started? That's it, right? Literally just get started. And so, you bring up an interesting point too when you mention LinkedIn and hiring systems. And if we could, I want to get really technical about integrations and how much integration is going to be needed. And so when we look at the ecosystem right now, there's the talent platforms, right? Like yourself. There's the existing VMSs. There's the existing MSPs. There's the compliance partners. There's the payroll partners, right? There's all these different partners. Do you think that freelance should sit on its own? Do you think that it should be integrated between MSPs? Should there be API calls between Fieldglass and Beeline? How do you think about this integration as our industry matures? Can we stay siloed on the side? Do we need to start to integrate? What do you think about integration?
Yeah, I'll talk about the organization first, and then we can talk about the product or technical side of things like APIs, etc. Because I think you're bringing up a really good point about the fact that just to work with someone, a lot of departments in an organization needs to be involved, right? It's procurement, it's finance for budgeting, it's the people who need to vet the person, decide if that's a great fit for them, the actual partners who are going to work with the person. There's just a lot of people involved, and one of the ways that we've been thinking about it at Fiverr is that we think it's time that every company would consider having a chief freelance officer, which rather than having someone who a hiring manager needs to go through multiple functions internally, you can have someone who runs freelance on behalf of the organization. They create the access to talent, and then they empower the rest of the organization to find the talent that they want, and then as simply as possible, right, start working with them. And what we want to do at Fiverr is really democratize the access to talent, because and again, that enables business. That enables you to, on the one hand, get that expert advice that you need. You mentioned sometimes you think you need a CMO or you think you need a CFO, but you really need someone who has the experience and expertise that can give you the advice, the consulting that you need in order to make a decision or to build a plan or to build a strategy, right? And those people are valuable. They're valuable. They might have been, in the C-suite of a company for a certain period of time, and now they might be looking for their next thing. And they can be a fractional CFO or fractional CMO. But for them, finding the right talent is also really, or the right company for them, it's really also pretty difficult, right? They know they don't always have the platform that can enable them to find those companies who have a need for their services. So I think Fiverr can really be the place that bridges those gap between the two sides, clients on one hand, and those could be clients who need advice from a CXO, or they need a developer or a designer, and you have the talent who might be having a very specific domain expertise like design or engineering, or might be a marketing expert, right? And if you can connect the two and almost make it as simple as making it immediate, rather than a really long hiring process, I think it really simplifies things for both sides. It can also evaluate whether there's a fit, right? Because part of the challenge with the hiring process, and we'll go to the product and tech side in a minute, but I mean, part of the challenge in the hiring process is that you only have, the interview process to evaluate if this is a great fit for both sides, right? Both sides evaluate, both the interviewing party and the party that's interviewing for the role. But then it's kind of there, right? I mean, there's a match, and that match may work or may not work. All you had to do is maybe put 5 or 6 hours into it, but then you're going to commit for years to come for this person. What you can do with freelance talent is onboard them, get their advice, get the work, and if within a month or two there is no fit, then that's okay, right? I mean, the freelancer can go and work on their next project. The company can find a different person, right? So and if there is a great match, and that match continues into the future. So I think that can really something that our industry enables, and traditional platforms do not. Now, when it comes to the product side, I think there's a couple of things that we're highlighting in our upcoming product release that I think is worth talking about, exactly to the point that you mentioned around product and technology. So one of the things that we've realized about where Fiverr started versus where we're going is that we were really great at defining service as a product. So I'm a freelancer, that's my skill, that's what I'm doing. You can buy this service from me for an X amount of money, and I'm going to do this project for you that has a start and date and have a defined scope. That's great when you know exactly what you need. But when you don't, and you gave some of these examples, when you don't and you just need to speak with someone, you might want to evaluate if that person has the right skills and expertise to do the work. And we're going to make it available to look at a person's skills, expertise, experience, education, etc., as well as their portfolio of work. So you can have a much better idea from the start if that's the person you want to work with. And now, when you think about the things that Fiverr enables, and we think we're really great at, the work itself is is oftentimes quite complicated. What we call fulfillment, right? If you think about it, that's the equivalent of e-commerce, where an item goes from a shelf to a truck to a plane and eventually gets to a person in a house. When you match a client with a freelancer, it's just the beginning of the process, right? It's not the end of it. And now the work actually starts, and there's evaluation, and there's drafts involved, and there's requirements, and there's revisions and iterations. And then at the end of the process, they both provide a review about each other. How was the work? Did I enjoy? Did I get the benefits that I expected to work with this specific person? So Fiverr can enable or reuse some of the elements that we've created on the marketplace that serve us really, really well, and then leverage them for finding the right talent who we need to work with. And I think that's really something that we plan to showcase front and center in our upcoming product release. And then kind of beyond that, I think we do need to think about APIs and innovate in that space, because today it's not plug and play. It's adding talent or embedding talent in your organization is not plug and play. The evaluation process is difficult, but also the work itself isn't really figured out. There are things that you can do. There are things that if you do, then you need to ask for help from legal to make sure you're compliant. So there's much more product discovery needs to be done in that area.
And do you see a world where the systems talk to each other? Meaning, Fieldglass is where the work starts, right? It spits to Fiverr. Fiverr says, here's the talent that you need. The hiring manager in Fieldglass says, check, yep, that's what I want. And the payment, you name it. Do you see a world where the players interact in that way, or do you think we have to always be operating in our own silos?
So I think, like many things in our industry, at some point they go through the process of standardization. Think about operating software on a cloud. Initially, and your podcast is a human cloud, so you kind of know what I'm talking about, right? But initially, every company had its own data center with its own machines, and it had its own specific configurations, and they had a lot of specific needs. But then, when cloud companies started, and then this industry just boomed because they had so much more available that companies could leverage, and created efficiencies in their businesses, as well as the ability to scale up and scale down as you need. You really saw the benefits of that. And now, there are very few companies who are not on the cloud, right? Or industries who are not on cloud. And I think the same thing is probably true for our industry as well. We're just further further in the back from where the cloud industry was, maybe 2 decades ago. But I have no doubt that we'll get there. And I'm saying it because of two reasons. First, if you look at Gen Zers or new generations, my kids as an example.
Yeah.
When you think about what they want to do when they grow up, many of them wants to be freelancers. They want to have control over their careers. They want to do the things that they love doing. They want to have control how much time they spend on working on a specific project or doing other things. And freelancing enables them to do that. It's not easy by any stretch, right? But it enables them that flexibility. And on the other hand, you think about the needs of clients, and they also have a need to scale up and scale down. So, theoretically, there's a great match here, but for some reason, because we haven't yet created that cloud infrastructure for talent, we haven't really connected the dots in the way that we can in our industry. But I have no doubt it will happen over the next couple of years. You already see this starting to happen, and I think it's very likely going to accelerate.
Yeah, I love the analogy of the cloud infrastructure versus Uber for talent. The Uber for talent, Dan, that was tough, man. Like we had executive leaders that would be going across the company saying, "Yeah, this is like Uber for talent," and then people would turn around and go, "I don't want to hire Uber for talent, right? I need an ad campaign done. I need Azure development. I need this. I'm sorry, but I don't need a gig economy type solution." And so I love the analogy of a cloud infrastructure versus, what we've heard prior, which is like on-demand talent, right? Or there's, various terms. Now, there's three things that when looking at the migration from on-prem to the cloud, though, that I look and say, hey, our industry doesn't have it yet. And I wonder, and you've kind of called them out. And so the first thing is you mentioned a chief freelance officer. I would argue there's not even a bullet line from the CHRO or the chief procurement officer or the CEO's directive. There's no bullet item that says, hey, migrate to freelance. So in the, from a cloud transformation perspective, there is, but not for us, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is you will see across every single company, there's a Microsoft program manager. And I'll never forget when I was working at Microsoft, I would look at all of our customers and I'd be like, wait, do they work for us? Or do they, like, their job title says M365 program manager, yet they work at a bank or whatever it is. And so we don't have that, right? We don't have a freelance program manager. Now, I will say at Microsoft, we did have a freelance program manager. And across the best freelance programs, they do have an explicit freelance program manager. So that's the second thing, right? So we don't have a bullet line under the CTO, CIO, or CEO. We also don't have specific job titles just for us. The third thing, though, we don't have a Dreamforce. And so if you look at what Salesforce did so good was they created the ecosystem of deployment partners, events, you name it. And everyone knew at this time, everyone's going to San Francisco. It's Dreamforce. And there was this beautiful deployment ecosystem. And so I wonder your perspective. If I were to say, hey, Dan, yeah, I want to hire Fiverr tomorrow, but you need to tell me what the chief freelance officer's job description would be. What would you say are the three things that chief freelance officer, what are the three things that they need to do?
I think that's a great question because as you mentioned, many companies have not yet adopted this approach. They're used to working in quite traditional ways, and because they've worked for them for so long, right? But the moment you realize you need that is when things don't work at the speed that you need, and they don't enable the business growth that you expect. So I'll talk about some job descriptions, so to speak. I think the first one is being an evangelist. You, as a chief freelance officer, you want to really empower your team to get the talent that they need to get the work done. And if that enables you think about freelance talent, that enables you to compete on quality, on cost, on speed, on availability, and on effort, and you can win on all five of those things, then at that point, the freelancer can get you better output and better outcomes than hiring someone, right? And we mentioned one example before that you can get them on board faster, right? They're valuable. So that's one. You have to be an evangelist to be able to kind of promote the idea that all teams need to embrace that approach. So that's first. Second, they need to be able to find the mechanism to manage that talent. In the same way that we have HR for full-time employees, we need to think about the chief freelance officer to find the specific areas where there is nuance and there is importance for things like maybe compliance, maybe the do's and don'ts, right, that you need to follow. And they need to define those guidelines very clearly about what talent we want to bring in and what are the different ways that we need to work with them to ensure that we're getting the best of them while following the needs of the business in terms of compliance and other needs. So that's second. And I think third, and maybe kind of the most important, is to define the metrics of success. Like you think about everything you do for the first time, then you say, okay, well, what would success mean? If there's a successful chief freelance officers, if we adopt this as a company, what would success mean? In many cases, it would mean business success, right? I mean, the business would move faster, it would grow faster, or it would become more efficient or cost effective. It really depends on your specific business goals. And then you cascade this down into the organization and say, okay, then how can we make that happen? If you want to build, let's take a tech company as an example, and you want to build a certain product, and the product requires a specific skill set that you don't have internally, then what were your two traditional options? One way was to transition resources from one group to another group to make that happen, and maybe starve another part of the organization. Well, but in many cases, you have the budget, and if you can augment and embed talent from the outside to work on a specific project and enables you to get it done in maybe 3 months rather than a year, and the business as a result can grow faster, that everyone wins, right? So I think it's about creating that linkage between business success and how bringing in talent and working with talent in a way that really enables you to move fast and succeed is kind of the third thing. But to me, kind of it almost feels like a no-brainer these days because the talent is there. We have it on Fiverr. I mean, we have, at any given point we have hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people available for work. Right? They may not have hundreds of thousands in your specific skill set. We may just have 100, right? But we have many of them who are available almost immediately to start working, sometimes immediately to start working, or at the minimum, jumping on a conversation, having the ability to speak with you and get give you some guidance, right, about the things that you need to do. So for us, it's kind of connecting the dots between the two parties is what I think is really what the chief freelance officer should be doing.
I love it. So Dan, we now have the 3-step process, right? So step 1, you got to be an evangelist. You got to get out there. Step 2, I'd say you got to build the spec doc. So that's everything from what's the experience, who's the ideal teams, how do you do risk mitigation, what is the risk mitigation? And then third is you got to define the metrics of success. And then this is where you now then it's just the build, measure, learn feedback loop, right? It's iterating every month. You just got to do better than the last. Listen, as we come to the close, the last thing I want to talk about is what are the product launches that you guys have done. And so Fiverr's always excelled at velocity, right? You're always shipping. And what I want to do is I want to ask 2 questions, one quick and one might be a little longer. But so the first question is going to be what I'm going to call the bullshit meter. And so the bullshit meter on AI, right? All the way to the left, we'll say utter bullshit, right? None of this is real. All the way to the right, we're going to say this is completely real. Every enterprise is embracing this. And if you don't, hop on, you're going to be left behind. And so on the range, are we talking all the way to the right or all the way to the left? And then I'm going to sit back and shut up and you let us know sort of what's been the fun, exciting stuff that's happened at Fiverr over the past month.
Great. So let's start with an AI. And I think you're right. There's a spectrum of opinions, and sometimes they're quite polarizing. And I think the reason they're polarizing is that it really depends on your specific use case. I think what AI has really excelled, if you think about maybe the last 2 years, right, since kind of ChatGPT and DALL-E has emerged and as the fastest growing products in history, essentially, is that it really enabled to do certain work more efficiently. You can do it faster And previously, I mentioned the five things that you need to do in order to win, which are quality, speed, cost, availability, and sorry, I think I missed someone. And effort, right? It needs to be really simple, right? And what the AI enables you to do is really do all five, because the effort of using AI is writing a prompt. Right? Most people are capable of writing a sentence of what they need. The quality of the output is really great, whether it's creating a doc or editing a video, etc. And then it's speed wise, it's instantaneous. It's always available. You go to a website or Discord, and and the cost is in many cases practically zero, right? That's or maybe it's relatively low. So it's been really helpful at doing some work that only humans were capable of doing until this point. So if you think about it, for the most part, the people who are on the AI camp are blown away by the level of efficiency that we're able to achieve, and it's been really been great at cost savings for certain functions that humans could only do until very recently. But if you think about what AI has enabled in terms of business growth, if I put aside maybe NVIDIA and OpenAI, think about the companies who really were able to build large, successful businesses where AI is at the core of what they do. Not yet, right? Not so many. So I think, but I have no doubt it will happen. We just haven't found the killer use case that we think can be unlocked. Maybe kind of similar to the relatively humble beginnings of the iPhone, where we couldn't imagine that you're going to have all of these different apps, and basically in your palm, and you can order something to eat, or you can, take a ride somewhere. You really thought, oh, it's a phone. We even call it the iPhone, even though it's definitely not the primary function of what we use it today. So I think AI will definitely evolve into that kind of Swiss Army knife, and we're going to use it for many more things today. But how much business is going to come out of it? That's still, still haven't done this yet.
I will say, so I use it in one way that this is going to sound so basic, but really was powerful. And so, write an article and probably would have required 5 to 10 hours of research, probably would have required 30 to 50 different Google searches, I would say. And so I asked it one prompt, which was something around, how has healthcare embraced the freelance economy? It gave me 7 good use cases, the exact hospitals that used them. And so then all I had to do was tell my writing team to reverse engineer the sources, right? So I could look. So, I mean, that was really powerful, that instead of having to pay for probably the 20 to 30 hours of research time, it was like that, right? And then my writing team could do it, and so the copywriters could do it rather than having to have researchers,
Right.
or spend the time. So, and last thing, Dan, give us the updates on Fiverr. What's been going on the last month?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very, very excited about what we're doing right now. So I mentioned some of this in our previous conversation, but essentially, you mentioned that Fiverr has been traditionally been pushing a lot of product over the years, and we moved into relatively large biannual releases. So we have our winter release that was in January. I think that's when you spoke with Gali, and then we have our summer release that's coming up. And with our summer product release, there's a few things that we're really, really excited about. The first one is kind of related to AI, is Neo. Neo is Fiverr's agent who's really capable of helping you find the talent that you need. We've launched it in August of last year, and we're really extending the use of it across the product in multiple ways. So clients who are looking for talent will be able to speak with Neo in the same way that they speak to an expert, or maybe a hiring expert, and tell them exactly what they need, and they would understand why they're seeing the talent that they're seeing as the best choice for their business. So it's really personalized in the sense that your specific needs are taken into account, and if you want to refine them and really nail down specific skill sets, you can do that with Neo. So that's coming up really soon. We're really, really excited about that. So that's one. Second is the professional catalog. As I mentioned, we have a ton of talent, but where Fiverr started with is with services, or if you will, the word that Fiverr trademark, what we would call them gigs, right? Basically, those are predefined package services that the freelancer can do for you. Now, we realize that sometimes you look for a person who has a specific profession. They have certain skills, like I need the front-end developer, or I need a marketing expert, right? And until now, when you search for these terms on Fiverr, you would get gigs, you would get services, but those are very, very granular. And when you need to find talent and speak with them, that's too detailed at the point that you need to explore the right person with the right skill set. So we're launching in close to 40 categories. We're launching a profession-based catalog, which is really highlighting the talent that has the specific skills that you need to get the work done. And then you can really choose between a relatively small number of experts with the specific expertise that you need, and then you can start a conversation with them or hire them for the work that you need. So it's really a different marketplace in a way, if you think about where Fiverr started and kind of where we're going. Much closer to what we spoke about earlier, how we help embed talent on teams. And third, and that's maybe the biggest news for some of the folks, for the first time, Fiverr is going to introduce hourly contracts. So where Fiverr has really excelled in the past is those predefined services where there is a predefined price for a predefined package of things that you need. But many businesses and larger clients, they need the flexibility to hire someone on their own terms. And that might mean that they may not know exactly when the process is going to start and when it's going to end. And they need the flexibility around that. So they might want to start with an hour of consulting and then realize, okay, I really like this person. Maybe I'm going to hire them for 3 weeks or maybe 3 months. And then having the flexibility to scale it up and down, basically based on hourly contracts, is going to be hugely powerful for clients who really need that flexibility and weren't able to find it on Fiverr so far. So these are the 3 things that we're launching and we're really, really excited about. The other thing that I mentioned is and we talked about this earlier, is AI. And we think that in many of our experience, you're going to see AI behind the scenes. So you may not know it, but a lot of things that we've done over the years is use AI for search, like search and other things. But now we use it in multiple ways where we think there's really a value add for the customer, whether it's making a decision on who you want to work with, or simplifying how to go through 1,000 reviews and summarizing them for you so we can make the right decision, similar to the example that you gave earlier. And think about how AI and talent come together, because they will come together, right? We're not competing. It's about complementing each other's capabilities, and that's where we're going.
I love it. Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time. This has been an absolute blast. And most important question is, where can our listeners find you?
Freelancers can find me obviously on Fiverr. That's one of the ways that we constantly passionate about. We'd love to speak with our customers on a frequent basis. So I'll share my email, and I'd love people to come me for anything they need. And besides that, we definitely have our customer service teams who are willing to speak with customers and bring their requests and features to us every day of the week. So looking forward to that.
I love it. All right, Dan, thank you so much for hopping on the pod.
Thank you so much for having me.